Hi, I'm Greg Aldridge. I'm CEO of EveryMan Australia. EveryMan Australia is a community service organisation which works with men with high and complex needs. We work predominantly with guys coming out of the prison system or involved in the corrections system, living in the community. So typically that means working with people who've got histories of drug and alcohol use, mental health issues, intellectual disabilities, often have histories of growing up in pretty dysfunctional families where there was violence and abuse. And there's quite a bit of acquired brain injury from various things, substance abuse sometimes because of violence. We also work with guys who use violence with partners and with family, and we work too to support the partners and families of people who use violence. We also work with victims of violence. We run an Indigenous housing program for families and individuals who need support with transitional accommodation because they're at risk of homelessness. When I was first introduced to the Being Profile was when we were doing some training with the management team of another organisation. And it really gave us what I was looking for, which was a way of having a conversation with members of the management team of another organisation as well as mine about taking on what it was that we were responsible for and having a sense of ownership. So instead of having stories that were all about how busy we were and how stressed we were, giving us conversations where we started to get excited about the possibility of partnership. And those meetings became more and more animated and more productive. And all of the participants still have great communication with each other and effective working partnerships, which was really what I was looking for. The other thing that we got out of it was a way of being able to talk to each other when responsibility wasn't present, when people were making excuses for why they hadn't done things, people who were saying that there wasn't really a problem when there was. Suddenly we had a way of talking about that stuff where people didn't feel like they were being blamed. What the Being Profile gives our organisation access to is relationships between supervisors and their team that understand that people can change very easily. We don't see people as being stuck anymore, and I've seen relationships with staff members that had occurred to me as difficult and hard to move, really opening up. Productivity is much higher, work satisfaction is higher, people look forward to coming to work, and we're just so looking forward to being able to take some of these practices and the understanding of the Being Profile to the people that we support in the community. People in the community sector aren't really familiar with coaching. They just know about it through stories that they hear. When they started to have conversations with me about the Being Profile, they started to get access to some understanding of how their conversations with their own staff, their own team members, could become open and based on trust and communication. It gave them access to understanding the areas of their own lives and their own ways of being in the world that got in the way of them being effective as leaders. And what was really wonderful to watch was the excitement that they would bring with them into their coaching and their supervision conversations, where we could look at how much communication had been improving in their teams. I had one manager who regularly rated very low in terms of team satisfaction using our internal evaluation tools, who, like, every month we were looking at her evaluations and seeing how her team were starting to rate her higher and higher and higher on every dimension. It was really satisfying for her and great for productivity in the team. One of the really great things about the Being Profile is people can look at aspects of who they are and understand from the coaching conversation that a way of being is something that has flexibility, that they're not trapped inside of it. People who've had the experience of doing psychological workplace assessments often get that they've got some fixed way of being that they're stuck with for the rest of their lives. But the great thing about the being profile is that people can see that so many different things contribute to a way of being, that there's always room for flexibility and change and development. It builds a lot of hope, a lot of motivation, and a lot of excitement. One of the things that is really great about the being profile is being able to sit with people and look at a report. That they get to own their report. It's not like, it's the HR manager did a psych assessment and that's now on a file somewhere. This is given to people as something that they can take away and get benefit from for themselves. So I can have a conversation now with somebody who's got issues with being assertive and work in partnership with them to start addressing that. I mean, people are looking at areas of life that they've always been restrained in talking to other people about and saying, here, can we do some work on this? I'd really like to shift this. As part of my training, I've done being profile assessments and debriefs with probably about 15 to 20 people inside of this organisation. And they've been really amazing experiences. People who have been struggling in areas of their work have suddenly found that looking at the being profile allows them to identify areas that are at the source of the struggles that they're having in their workplace. I mean, we work with really challenging men, and you've got no idea how many of my case managers are uncovering that they have issues with assertiveness. And that's given us the opportunity to start giving them some training and development that helps them address stuff that they experience personally as significant constraints on their work. The difficulties that I was experiencing with our board were that people weren't taking much in the way of personal responsibility for their participation. A couple of things that happened where people would come up and speak to me after meetings, they wouldn't speak up in meetings, and there were some serious risks to our organisation from some of the things that a couple of board members had done. And I was really concerned that people didn't feel empowered to speak up in meetings and didn't really understand how to be responsible for what they were responsible for as board members. I was really worried about board members not speaking up when things were happening that, from my view as a CEO, they should have been concerned about and challenging each other about. I could see that the being profile would start to give them access to and ownership of the areas of the life in which they were constrained and holding themselves back. And that having acknowledged that for themselves in those private coaching or debrief sessions with the person who was responsible would motivate them to participate in the training from a position of understanding how they were being as board members. A conversation that very few of them would have ever had before, and that I knew they'd find really personally interesting and would start to open up and give them some sense of curiosity about how they could deal with those things and become more effective as board members. The really great thing that I can see now is that the board, every member who attended that training, talks about who they are as board members in a way that they never used to talk about before. They challenge each other. We've had some difficult conversations, but they have a sense of being present to that and being responsible for that and valuing it. So if there's some disagreement, they'll just make a note that there's been some disagreement. Sometimes they'll even laugh about it, whereas, like 2 years ago, if there'd been disagreement, everyone would have been really nervous and walking on eggshells. I tell you, it's made my job a bit harder because they're now much more united and giving me work to do. But the payoff for me is I feel like we've got really effective governance now, and the board themselves are really committed to having this training inform everything that we do in our organisation because they've experienced the benefit for themselves. Because I've done the being profile accreditation myself, I immediately saw the value not just to the management level of our organisation, but to coordinators, lead practitioners, people who have to have any sort of working relationship with other staff and with clients too. So what we're doing is training a number of people. We've selected a first tranche to come in and do that training. 2 managers, coordinator, and a couple of frontline workers. What I'm looking at getting out of that is having people who have a key mentoring and guidance role for other staff in the organisation, starting to use the elements of the being profile, starting to talk about moods, drivers, ways of being as part of our language. Even having conversations with people about our distinctions. When I talked to somebody about commitment in a coaching program the other day, I said, yeah, this is an in Genesis distinction, but we're taking it on as our distinction, and it then becomes part of our organisation's language, and people are really responding to that. What I'm wanting to do out of this is to take coaching, Thrive Coaching and the being profile out into the community sector here in the ACT to start developing strong partnerships that are based on trust and effective communication between organisations, and really bring the sector together in a way that has never been possible before. I never had any thoughts about being a coach myself. I'm committed to being CEO of this organisation until I retire, which hopefully it'll be in about 10 years' time. But what I saw in this coaching program was that I can coach my team. I can really support them to deal with whatever it is that they're dealing with in a way that has them expand personally and professionally. The idea that I can have a strong relationship of trust and effective communication with every single person in this organisation, that was never going to happen before. So now I can see that it's not just a vision, it's already starting to unfold in front of me. And what that gives every single staff member that I'm coaching is access to how to be effectively in their relationships with everyone that they support, whether it's people that they're supervising or their clients. I was working through a period where there'd been a breakdown in the organisation. My co-founder had left abruptly, and after he left, stories started to emerge of what was probably borderline workplace bullying, and there was some disillusion and hurt in the organisation that I really took on as my responsibility to heal. There was also conflict between me and some of my board members, so it was a difficult place to start from. And how I came across the Thrive program was through going to a presentation that one of the Genesis principals gave here in Canberra. And I immediately became interested in getting some coaching to support me as a CEO. And that's really where I came from. I thought I need all the help I can get to really, bring this organisation up to speed and start having more effectiveness in looking after my staff and helping them get through this process and, really renew their commitment to working here and working with our clients. It never really occurred to me that I would start to get so much more out of it. But when I started doing the coaching, I realised that if I brought this to the whole organisation, we could have a 360-degree transformation in the way that we operated at every level, in the frontline work that our case managers and counsellors do with clients, the way that managers and coordinators work with their teams, and the way that the managers and coordinators worked with me to have really great collaborative partnerships in bringing the organisation up to what's possible for us to achieve. And then I got really cheeky and decided it would be really great if we got our board to do the training as well, because I thought that would really give us a true 360-degree transformation. And the other thing that it would bring was really effective communication between me and the board, because I can tell you, every CEO I've ever spoken to in the community sector, as soon as you sit down and start talking, if there's no one around, the conversation eventually comes to, how are you getting on with your board? And very often there's a lot of tension there. The reason we're having our managers do the Thrive Coach training is that people have been reluctant to grapple with the issue of responsibility. What am I responsible for in my job? Like everyone else, we live in a world of excuses and justifications for why we're only doing like 80% of what we're supposed to be doing. We now have a really empowering conversation about responsibility, where people see that responsibility is access to doing your job at a level that you never thought you were going to be able to. It's aspirational and empowering. And that's really something that I've struggled to find with many other approaches I've taken to managing this organisation. The Thrive Coach training's a 13-week program, and we're doing our classes for a few hours on a Friday night. And I really look forward to that, because it's an opportunity to get from people some inspiration about going back and dealing with stuff that's difficult or challenging. It's a really wonderful learning experience. We get lots of opportunities to explore the training in a really constructive way during the week by the exercises that we have to do, and it has really practical, real life impact on what's going on in my organisation. Every Monday when I come back after doing the training, I've got something new, some new conversation that I'm having with my team, some new exercise that I'm getting people to do to explore some aspect of the way that they're working. And it's all stuff that people get enjoyment out of, as well as it's stimulating them and having them learn. To any CEO who's considering this training, I would say to you, if you don't want to just tick a box, if you really want to transform the culture of your organisation and have a huge impact on your staff, this is a program like no other. It will turn things around quickly, powerfully, and you'll actually have staff buy-in almost from the word go, which is totally unlike any other program that I've ever done. It's not do a course and then 2 weeks later go back to how you were doing things before. It really creates the foundation for long-lasting change in your organisation.